Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a longtime baseball fan, played all growing up, been a baseball coach for a little over a decade. I'm a season ticket holder, love everything about the game, especially talking about the game. And today I am talking about the Tampa Bay Rays. So joining me to talk about the Rays is the unofficial historian of D-Rays Bay, uh, the Rays fan website, Adam Sanford, who also has a YouTube channel cataloging Rays history, several great moments in Tampa Bay Rays history. His YouTube channel is The Sanfords. Adam, welcome to the program.
What's going on? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about the Rays today. And we are broadcasting today from the catwalk, one of the catwalks in Tropicana Field,
Yep.
one of the iconic little bits of Tropicana Field. I'm not sure if it's a positive or a negative, but it's something.
It's a positive when it helps the Rays, negative when it goes against them.
Exactly, there it is. So the Rays are one of the youngest teams in baseball. They were founded as an expansion team in 1998, along with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They were originally the Tampa Bay Devil Rays for their first decade of existence, from 98 to 07. Then they switched to the Tampa Bay Rays in 08. They dropped the Devil. Adam, how did you feel about that when they dropped the Devil and went just to the Rays?
I mean, I didn't really like Rays whenever they first came up with the name. I just like they just dropping the devil. That's stupid. But I mean, it's definitely grown on me. And since the years it's come on, them winnings probably helped a lot with that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, does it have a specific? Because I know the Devil Rays obviously was the marine animal, and now the Rays, is it? It seems kind of ambiguous because it could still be the animal, but it can also
Yeah.
be the sunshine rays.
The concept is it's supposed to be sunshine rays. They kind of wanted to cut the connotation with devil because a lot of people are unhappy with that. They don't say that, but that's basically what the reasoning was. Funny story as to why they're the Devil Rays. Vince Naimoli, the original owner, was known for penny pinching. And in 95, when they were deciding the team's name, he left it up to the fans to decide there was the Stingrays or the Devil Rays. And everybody in the community wanted Stingrays. They hated the Devil Rays. But a team in Hawaii owned the rights to the Stingrays.
Oh.
And yeah, Naimoli did not want to pay them the $30,000 for the naming rights. So he's like, hey, everybody, you get what you want. We're going to be the Devil Rays. Yeah.
Yeah. The Stingrays does sound a lot better than the Devil Rays. Interesting. I was not aware of that. And so they've been there in Tropicana Field their entire existence from 1998 to the present. I know, the Trop gets a lot of hate across baseball. What's your opinion of the Trop?
I've always loved watching baseball there. To me, it's a great place to watch a game, really comfortable indoors because Florida weather sucks, especially during the summer. But the problem with it is getting there. Like
Mm-hmm.
once you're there in the field, the stadium, it's a great place to watch a game, comfortable, everything's good. It's like there's not a bad seats, but getting there is the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the main calling cards is why their attendance is bad. It's just nobody wants to travel to get there.
Yeah, because I mean, it's in St. Petersburg, is that correct?
Yeah, it's in St. Petersburg, but the main populace of the Tampa Bay area lives across the bridge in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone getting off work in Tampa at 5 o'clock, well, there's only one main expressway basically to get to St. Petersburg, and you have to cross the bridge, and you would basically have to fight rush hour on that bridge for however long to get to the stadium for a 3 hour game. Then you have to do it again to get back
Mm-hmm.
once the game's over. So I mean, a lot of people just rather sit at home and watch it on TV, and it shows that because their TV ratings are among the best in baseball, at least in the top half.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, is there? I know that there's with Tampa with the Rays. There's been rumors, and them playing half games in Montreal and new stadiums, right? what's the from someone who's in Tampa there? What's that like? Is there going to be a new stadium? Do you think they're going to play a split schedule at some point with Montreal?
Well, just to clear up something, I actually don't live in Tampa. I moved away from it a while ago, but I do have opinions on it. Um, the owner, Steven Sternberg, is very, very optimistic about the split season. But I mean, anyone who's in Florida, like everyone I know, they just don't see how it can work, and they don't support it at all. They don't want to pay for a brand new stadium and only get half a season.
Understandable.
Yeah. I mean, eventually, I think St. Petersburg caves and they actually get a stadium in a new location. I mean, not a new location, but they tear down the Trop and build a stadium in that same area and just redevelop the entire area, which is what St. Petersburg's goal was all along. It just hasn't really come to fruition yet. But I think that's ultimately what happens. Or they just lose the baseball together and goes to Montreal.
Okay. And they have had some recent success there. Again, once you mentioned when they dropped the Devil and changed to just the Rays, they won the AL East in 2008 and 2010, and then most recently, just this past year in 2020. They've also won the wild card in 2011, 2013, and 2019. They've got 2 AL pennants, 2008 and 2020, but they're still looking for that first World Series title. Again, that past decade, they're just over a decade. They've got, about half a dozen postseason appearances. So pretty impressive there from the Rays, considering all of the factors working against them.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got in their short history a few retired numbers. Number 12 retired for Wade Boggs, 66 for Don Zimmer, and then of course 42 retired for Jackie Robinson throughout baseball. I mean, Boggs had a short tenure there. Is he from Florida originally?
Yeah, the Wade Boggs story is just it changed baseball really because the Hall of Fame got involved. So the whole thing, like, it doesn't make sense. Tampa Bay retired his number before Boston did. So, like, their story goes is that whenever the Devil Rays signed Wade Boggs before their inaugural season, is they agreed to retire his number, give him some kind of ceremony in exchange for whenever he eventually went to the Hall of Fame to put a Devil Rays hat on his plaque. That's the story. Wade Boggs was basically all Tampa Bay was during the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. Once the initial excitement of the new team came out and was wearing down, attendance started to dwindle, it became Wade Boggs' chase at 3,000. Hey, don't miss Wade Boggs' chase. We're covering every single hit this season. And then he eventually hit it. And then they had a huge Wade Boggs celebration a few weeks later. He retired following the season, became their hitting coach in 2000 and didn't really work out. But yeah, that's when they retired his number. So just after 2 seasons of, I mean, not amazing baseball, not awful, but just, being an aging hitter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The best retired number in team history, besides, Jackie Robinson's 42, Don Zimmer's 66, the 66 symbolizing how many years he spent in professional baseball, which is just absolutely mind-boggling.
Very impressive.
He spent and he was with the Devil Rays. Like, I think he joined them the year after. If you remember the Pedro Martinez incident where he threw him to the ground, mm-hmm. He joined Devil Rays either the year after that or 2 years after, and served with them as an advisor in a bunch of capacities until passing away, I think in 2014 or 15 when it was. Okay. But yeah, that one holds much more meaning.
Very nice, very nice. Are there any? Who do you think is next on the list to have their number retired by the Rays?
Longoria.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not retired yet or anything. He probably got another, hopefully 5-6 years under his belt. But he was traded away in 17 or before the 2018 season, and they still haven't given anyone the number 3, which I think is a very popular jersey number. So, I mean, I think they're saving it.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I'm sure Longoria will come up later on in the program. Adam, last week on the program, actually it's a couple weeks, we've been a little delayed here getting this episode. We discussed the Boston Red Sox And the trivia question on the Red Sox was who won the deciding games in the 2004 ALDS, ALCS, and the World Series. That was when they ended the curse. They broke the curse of the Bambino, finally won the World Series there in 04. So, Adam, before I reveal the answer, do you want to throw a guess out there for who won the deciding game in each of those 3 postseason series?
Oh man, it was the same pitcher all 3 games.
Well, I mean, that wasn't necessarily part of the question. It could potentially be the same pitcher.
Okay. I mean, I'm just gonna toss out Curt Schilling. I can't really think of anyone else. Yeah.
Yeah, Schilling, I think so. The bloody sock game, his famous game in the ALCS, I think when they came back against the Yankees there, they were down 3-0. I think that was game 6, actually.
See, that's what I was wondering. I couldn't remember which game that was. I was like, oh, it was game 6. There's no way he was the deciding pitcher, but yeah. I couldn't think of any other starting pitchers from their rotation.
Well, Pedro's another pitcher.
Was it? Oh, okay, he was still there.
He was there. He was there in 04. And then last week on the show, Andrew from the Gone Bridge podcast was on the episode, and he guessed Pedro for the division series, Derek Lowe for the ALCS, and Derek Lowe for the World Series. He got 2 out of 3. Derek Lowe actually won the deciding game in all 3 series.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm not sure how often that's ever been done. I mean,
that's gotta be a rarity.
Yeah. And I mean, we've only had, division play since 95 really. So it's So, but yeah, he got all 3 of those, which brings us to this week's trivia question. And so it's about the Rays. Who hit the first home run in Devil Rays history? And before I let you throw a guess out there, reminder, listeners, if you want to throw your guess out there, you can do so on social media at Boxy Banter on Twitter and Instagram. So first home run in Devil Rays history. Adam, do you have a guess on that one?
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually asked a trivia question to my fellow The Raysberry writers earlier today, and when this guy was actually the same answer. And the question to that one was, besides Rich Hill, who's 41, who was the oldest player to throw a pitch for the Devil Rays? And it's actually the same answer.
Interesting. All right, so you seem pretty confident in that. So we'll leave it open so that the listeners don't get the automatic answer.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting fact right there. So the
bottom of the 6th, it was a 2-run home run. Again, I think it wasn't the first run scored, but the Devil Rays already down 11 runs in the game. But yeah, bottom of the 6th, 2-run home run for this guy.
All right. And you said, so what was he's the oldest pitcher, or he?
All right. So Rich Hill is 41 years old right now.
Mm-hmm.
That he's going to be the oldest pitcher in Devil Rays and Rays history. They've never had an actual 41-year-old pitcher except for one guy who threw an inning in 1999. That was 41 years old.
Okay. Interesting. So it's also a bit of a hint since he was an older guy. So maybe that'll help the listeners answer this trivia question. Now the owners, you've mentioned, I think you mentioned both of them already, actually. They were originally owned by Vincent Naimoli from 98 to 04. Well, since prior to 98, but they began play in 98. So he owned them for those years. And then their current owner is Stuart Sternberg. He's owned the team since 05. And, the Rays are notorious for being on the cheaper end when it comes to payroll and everything like that. And, that stems from the owners. Adam, what are your thoughts on both of these owners?
They are very 2 different ends of the spectrum and how they try to approach the public. So Vince Naimoli, there are stories for days on just how much of a, not crook, just cheapskate, maybe is the word.
Mm-hmm.
So he made his fortune in buying companies and cutting away all the fat, trimming away anything that was not cost productive, and then making profits out of the company and then selling it. And he eventually took that into all of his background, negotiating everything, into finally landing Tampa Bay a team, because Tampa had been working for a team for decades. And it took Nemoli and a group of others who don't usually get any of the praise that they deserve. But Nemoli was the one who was finally able to get baseball to sign over the contract to, hey, we're going to be an expansion team. But there are so many stories for days of just how cheap he was, and his tactics just didn't work. There's one time he invited a high school marching band to play the Star Spangled Banner, then kicked them all out. They didn't buy tickets. Let's see. There's another one where, he refused. No, he was angry about the way somebody mentioned his team in an advertisement, and then that led to stores across the country pulling every Devil Rays merchandise off their shelves. So yeah, he was a character. He wanted to be successful from the very get-go, and he was willing to spend the money to do so at that point. And that's why you got Fred McGriff, you got Wade Boggs, eventually you got Jose Canseco. 2000, you got the Hit Show when you got Vinny Castilla, Greg Vaughn, and actually some lower heralded signings of that 2000 offseason that came in, veterans like Steve Traxel, Juan Guzman. Those guys came in. He wanted to buy the championship, and he wanted to do it with these names that people knew from the 90s, and it just didn't work out. Then let's see. Then it didn't work, and he learned very on in 2000 that, okay, he's not making a profit from the team. It's not fun to watch. Nobody's coming. Time to sell all these veterans off to whichever team wants to pay for the contracts and get a couple of young guys so we don't have to pay so we can pay the bills. And I mean, even in 2001 or 2002, the team was facing contraction rumors because there was rumors of them having cash flow issues. But yeah, so eventually he was ran out of town. New ownership group from New York came in, Stu Sternberg, and they basically gutted the franchise. They labeled it under construction. Basically what happened was, where they lost for so many years, the years of top draft picks finally paid off as the time that they came in and constructed the team. And that's how 2008 happened, is just a culmination of all these prospects finally blossoming, and this new ownership group who put in their analytics approach in the front office to acquire guys that, kind of a Moneyball approach, but not Moneyball, to bring in guys to make the team successful. And then 2008 happens, and they become a perennial contender.
Yeah. And so they've had that first under Nemoli. Chuck Lamar was the GM from 98 to 05. And then when Sternberg came in, he hired Andrew Friedman as the GM, and Andrew Friedman, the extra 2%, the book on him, which is kind of the equivalent to Michael Lewis, Moneyball on Billy Beane, the extra 2%, talking about Andrew Friedman and his process. He was there for about a decade, from 05 to 2014. Then he left, headed west to LA, and Matthew Silverman was GM for a couple years, 2014 to 2016. And now the current GM, Eric Neander, has been there for a few years, since 2016. What are your thoughts on these GMs here?
Okay. Chuck Lamar, the poor man, he inherited a really, really tough job of trying to make Vince Nemoli happy. Lamar came from the Braves. He was a very smart baseball man, and he tried building a team that would win using his intellect from the Braves, his time with the Braves, but also using what Nemoli wanted. Nemoli said, get McGriff. He got McGriff. He said, get Boggs. He got Boggs. But then there's things like, it was get veteran players. Don't get the youth. And so during the expansion draft, I mean, the Devil Rays, they drafted Bobby Abreu, and everyone knows he went on to have an amazing career for the Phillies. The Devil Rays also drafted Dimitri Young. So, I mean, there's two players who would have made the team much, much better in the early years, but They traded him away for Kevin Stalker and Mike Kelly, two
Mm.
guys who most people won't even recognize their names except for Phillies fans for Stalker's defense. But I mean, he's had to deal with that. And then he later on he had to deal with trading off those veterans that he brought in. One of the trades, this one I hate specifically, was for some reason they traded for Lou Piniella, the rights to have Lou Piniella manage their team. And they traded away their all-star center fielder, basically the best player on their team for the past year, Randy Wynn, for a manager. And they did get a prospect, Antonio Perez, but he didn't pan out. It's just he has made, though, one of the best deals in team history and probably the past 2 decades in baseball when he got Scott Kazmir for Victor Zambrano. That is one of the best trades in baseball. Mets fans probably just get heartburn instantly thinking about it. But yeah, so Lamar just had a tough job. Then Freeman came in, and we developed a thing on the Rays Bay for a while. Basically, whenever any trade was made and Freeman was involved, it was instant that the player was going to be good for Tampa Bay, and the player leaving Tampa was not going to be good. It's called Freeman. But yeah, he came in. He made his slide deals. He did make, though, a move that most people don't really remember. Josh Hamilton has his place in team history. And heading into the 2006 offseason, they left him off of their 40-man roster. He gets taken by the Cubs, traded to the Reds, and then goes on to have his MVP seasons with Texas. That's one move Freeman would probably take back if he could. But I mean, more often than not, his moves worked out. Then he left for much, much greener pastures when he went to Los Angeles and has since won the World Series with them. And
was it a bit of tough watching the World Series going against, the former GM, from your team, seeing him, having to go up against that in the World Series was that?
It's tough because how good he is at constructing a team, and then knowing he has $200 million to construct a team, it's like they're going to be incredible, and it shows. I mean, they've been in the World Series, I think 3 of the past 5 or 4 four times.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that just goes to show, and that's basically how long it took for him to construct the team, because he joined them in 2015 and they got to the World Series in 17.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they got there quick. They finally won in 2020. They're probably going to be there again this year. So he is just phenomenal at crafting a team. And the people that surrounded him in Tampa, they have developed such a brain trust and just a churn of front office people.
Mm-hmm.
You got James Click, who's with Houston now. You got Chaim Bloom with Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Neander, of course, with Tampa. Matt Arnold, I think he went to the Brewers, but they all came through Tampa's brain train, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it is impressive. And so, Neander's there now. Any thoughts on him or Silverman?
Silverman is really good as team president, not so much as GM, and that's why he handed the reins off to Neander.
Mm-hmm.
Silverman struggled. He got left a mess by Friedman and Joe Maddon leaving, because that whole situation was weird. So Friedman leaving triggered a clause in Joe Maddon's contract to allow Joe Maddon to go wherever. So all of a sudden, Silverman becomes GM of a team that has no manager, and just they were supposed to be good in 2014, and they finished well below expectations. But then he comes. So one of Silverman's first moves was to undo a move that Friedman had just done, the infamous Will Myers trade, in which they sent James Shields and Wade Davis to Kansas City for Myers. He undid that and started a whole new trade tree that is actually still flourishing for the Rays. But I mean, that was basically his best move for the team. And even that deal wasn't that great, because the Rays actually acquired Trey Turner from San Diego and immediately flipped him to Washington. But yeah, he tried it out for a little while, and then he moved back up to his presidential role and gave the reins to Neander, and Neander's done a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I mean, they got them. He's got, as we mentioned before, they won the wild card 2019. They won the East and the pennant in 2020. So even despite the limitations with the payroll, they're doing very well. And then you mentioned a couple of these managers' names, but let's see if you can identify the manager from a little fact I've got on them. Also, a bit of a warning: some of these guys who may have been managers for other teams, this is the 29th episode, 29th team that I've been on. So some of these guys I got to dig a little deeper on to find some of these facts. We'll start with their first manager, who won World Series rings with Cincinnati as their bullpen coach in 1990 and the Marlins as their pitching coach in 97.
Mm-hmm.
And who would that manager be?
That would be Larry Rothschild.
Yeah, he was their first manager from 98 to 01. After Rothschild, they had a manager who, as a player, was notorious for breaking up double plays. And there is a rule. The rule that requires the runner to slide is named after this player unofficially.
I love that play. I mean, I don't love that play that you're talking about, but I mean, I've seen it so many times. He doesn't even try to slide going into the base. He just barrel rolls into the poor infielder. That is Hal McRae.
Yeah, and he was there for a couple of years, 01 to 02. Then they had a manager who you mentioned before, somebody who they traded for. As a player, he was the first batter in Royals history in 1969, and he doubled and scored in his first time up.
Oh, that is a super interesting fact. I didn't know that about him. That's Sweet Lou Piniella.
Yep. Fiery manager. Managed the Reds, the Mariners, I think the Cubs, as well as the Rays. And I know he's known for playing for many years with the Yankees. Also, came up was on that Royals team. So he managed from 03 to 05 after they traded for him from Seattle. And then they had a manager who, here's something: managers can wear hoodies. Thanks to this manager, there were hooded sweatshirts were shortly banned in 2010, and managers were only allowed to wear jackets. But then the rule was quickly reversed, partly thanks to this manager.
That would be Joe Maddon.
Yeah, I wonder if Bill Belichick gave any opinion on that as well. But Joe Maddon, from 06 to 2014, as you mentioned, he used that escape clause in his contract there when Friedman left, which then opened the door to hire a new manager. And it was somebody who played in the Little League World Series and College World Series, was on a team who won the World Series, although he was not on the postseason roster that year. And he's also managed the World Series. So someone with a lot of World Series experience through a variety of levels.
That would be Kevin Cash.
Yeah. And I guess maybe later on in the show, there's something that I'm sure you're tired of discussing, but maybe we'll get to that a little later regarding Kevin Cash.
It doesn't involve Blake Snell, does it? Because I mean, surely nothing involving Kevin Cash and Blake Snell could be conversed about.
No, it can't. But yeah, anything you want to share about any of these managers before we move on?
Let's see. Oh, so there is a part of me that always thinks about the weird departure of Joe Maddon from the team. That kind of like, I always think that Matthew Silverman was like, hey Joe, you can go sign with another team now, Joe. Hey Joe, here's another team that wants to sign you, Joe. Like he's just kind of pushing him out the door. I kind of feel like that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think Silverman was just wanting a brand new, fresh start, a manager he could cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he just kind of, showed Joe Maddon the door, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously very successful there in Tampa. Then he goes and wins a World Series with the Cubs, but then he kind of got they kind of went their separate ways there in Chicago as well. So I don't know, maybe that's 2 times in a row that Maddon kind of wore out his welcome a little bit.
Yeah. He was definitely an acquired taste. He did some bizarre things, like all of his clubhouse things, like he brought in zoo animals. I think he had a mariachi band one time. He was strange, but some players dug it, some players didn't. And yeah.
All right, so there's the managers as well as some of the other front office personnel and ownership. But then coming right up, we'll look at some of the players from the past, from the entire Rays history, since that it covers pretty much the past 25 years. As we continue our trip down memory lane here to look at this Rays roster, a quick reminder to all the listeners how the roster is constructed. We're going back 25 years, although with the Devil Rays, since they began play in 98, that is the beginning point. And even though we've played the 2020 season, this was made prior to that. So I guess it's from 98 to 2019. So there's a few open roster spots actually on this team, along with the Diamondbacks. But you pick one player per year. You get that version of the player. You cannot repeat players, and you must form a coherent roster. So with this Rays team, having 23 or 22 years to choose from instead of the 25, I do not have a backup catcher, and I'm short 2 relievers on the roster, but every other position is filled. So we'll start with the only catcher on the roster, Travis d'Arnaud from 2019. He was worth 1.5 wins, 16 home runs. He hit 263, 323, 459, slightly above average with the stick. At first base, Carlos Pena, 2007. He was worth 7.2 wins, hit 46 home runs, drove in 121. Walked over 100 times, 103, good for a 411 on base percentage. He OPS over 1,000, OPS plus of 172. He was a silver slugger that year. At second base, the switch hitting Ben Zobrist from 2009. He was worth 8.6 wins, played all over the place, played second, right, short, left, center, third, first, even DH. He was an all-star, 27 home runs, 28 doubles, stole 17 bags, 297, 405, 543 triple slash, OPS plus of 149. So he really did it all. Swiss Army knife there for the Rays in 2009. At third base, Evan Longoria from 2010. He was worth 8.2 wins. 22 bombs, 46 doubles, drove in over 100. He even stole 15 bags, 294, 372, 507 triple slash. He was an all-star and a gold glover. And rounding out the infield, Julio Lugo from 2005, worth 4.4 wins. He was decent average, 295, 362, 403. So not a lot of pop, but he stole 39 bags. Slightly above average with the stick, but when he got on, he was dangerous there on the bases. So Adam, what are your opinion? Any memories from these infielders here?
What I love about the Devil Rays and the Rays was just how out of nowhere some of these guys would come and they just produce these amazing seasons. Like Travis d'Arnaud, 2019, the Rays catching situation, it was abysmal. Everyone was hurt. Their 2 main guys were hurt. Then in May, they just picked up Travis d'Arnaud from the Dodgers after he played in, I think, 1 game for them after he was dropping the Mets.
He was with the Mets. Yeah, he was with the Dodgers for he just played 1 game. He was there for maybe 3, and he had 1 at bat or something.
Yeah. And I mean, he's always been a top prospect, but I mean, he's never, flourished. I think he had a Tommy John surgery at one point or something. He had some kind of injury that kept him off the field for a while. And then he was just still regaining his footing, lost his job in New York, came to Los Angeles, then immediately dealt to the Rays, and he just broke out. He gave them a catcher that was a force to be reckoned with at the plate. and it was finally not a black hole anymore. And it led to them going to the division series. He came up in so many clutch situations. He had that game in New York when he was all the Rays offense. He hit a solo home run to lead off the game, had a second home run of the day a few innings later. Then they were down by 2 in the top of the ninth facing Chapman, and he hits a 3-run home run that just barely cleared the right field wall in New York, and the Rays won that one 5-4. Pena, he literally came out of nowhere. He didn't even make the team out of spring training in 2007. Took an injury to Greg Norton for him to finally come up sometime in April. And then he just went off in May and just started clubbing the ball. He shattered the team's records for home runs in a season. Like you said, got the comeback player of the year. Ben Zobrist, another guy that came out of nowhere. He was a walking machine in the minor leagues. The Devil Rays got him along with Mitch Talbot for Aubrey Huff in 2006. But they acquired him because he knew how to get on base. It's all he did was get on base, and he could play a competent shortstop. He was their opening day shortstop in 2007, and he just struggled. He finally started showing some of his power. He just started swinging the bat harder. I think that's literally what his method was, hey, start swinging the bat harder. And it worked. He started hitting more home runs. And then in 2009, he was used. Joe Madden could put him anywhere, and he did well. And then an injury to Akinori Iwamura allowed him to become a starter, and he just continued to excel. He never stopped hitting that season, became an all-star, like you said. Evan Longoria, I mean, if not for a bad foot and hamstring issues, he probably would be on a Hall of Fame pace. Everyone knows his story. He's basically the face of the franchise, future number retiree, hopefully Hall of Famer. Julio Lugo's another guy that came out of nowhere. They got him in 2003 after he had a domestic incident off the field, and they just swooped in. He started putting together some amazing years for them. 05 is just one of them. He could hit for contact. He could steal. He's one of the few major leaguers to hit a home run twice in the same inning. And he is also, I think, incarcerated for kidnapping. So there's that.
We'll try to focus on the positives here. As we move to the outfield, we've got Carl Crawford in left field from 04. He was worth 4.9 wins, led the league with 19 triples, also led the league with 59 stolen bases, but it came at a price as he was caught a league-leading 15 times. He hit 11 home runs, 296, 331, 450, triple slash. Solid out there defensively. He was an all-star. In center field, Randy Winn, a switch hitter from 02. He was worth 4.8 wins, 298, 360, 461, triple slash. He was the Rays all-star that year. In 02, he had 9 triples there, 39 doubles. And in right field, Aubrey Huff from 03. He was worth 4 wins, 34 home runs, 47 doubles, drove in over 100, but a little lackluster out there defensively. And then at DH, Greg Vaughn in 2000, he played a lot of left field, but he also DH'd a fair amount there. He was worth 3.2 wins, 28 home runs, 254, 365, 499 triple slash there for Vaughn. So I know Randy Wayne got traded away there after a great year. Anything else? Any other thoughts on these outfielders in the DH?
I mean, Carl Crawford, he's a franchise cornerstone. Basically, you can follow him from the Devil Rays being awful, bleak, nothing to watch, to becoming an exciting young team with promising players, to their eventual World Series contenders. He was the reason to watch the Rays in the early days. Randy Winn, I mean, just a very good player and very bad team. And he had a very good career well after he left the Devil Rays. Aubrey Huff, he was a power man. He could hit some majestic long balls. He was my favorite player growing up. don't really have that many great stories about him, and especially not in today's landscape. But he was very good for what he did for the Devil Rays.
Yeah, and on the bench, I've got Logan Forsythe from 2016. He was worth 3.5 wins. Played mostly second there for Tampa. 20 home runs, 24 doubles. And Logan Morrison from 2017, he hit 38 bombs, drove in 85 for the Rays. And in the outfield, I've got Kevin Kiermaier, a great defender there. I've got him from 2015. He was worth 7.1 wins. And a lot of that came with the glove. He hit, 10 home runs, 25 doubles, 12 triples. He was a Gold Glove. As defensively, he was worth 4.6 wins. He's exciting watching him run down balls there in center field.
Yeah, that Kevin Kiermaier is what we keep hoping comes into camp and stays healthy through a full year, and it hasn't happened. Probably since 2015, he's just dealt with injuries that have kept him off the field for months at a time. Mm-hmm. So he hasn't been able to showcase his glove or his offensive capabilities since then. Logan Morrison, he's one of the times where I've been loud wrong with the Rays. He was with the team in 2016, wasn't so good. And then 2017, they re-signed him. And me and a bunch of others included were really against that move. We wanted the team to get Chris Carter, the guy who had just hit 41 home runs with the Brewers. And we were like, get Carter. Don't get Morrison. You just had him and he didn't do good. And then Carter flames out with the Yankees and Morrison goes out and hits 38 bombs.
Yeah, it's sometimes, as a fan, a lot of times maybe you're right in those situations, but then other times you're like, well, I guess that's why those guys are in the position to make the moves.
Exactly.
As we move on to the pitching staff, we'll start with Scott Kazmir, the lefty from 2006. He was worth 4.2 wins, went 10-8 with an ERA about 3.25. He had one complete game shutout that year. Only made 24 starts that year, so the WAR could have been even higher. He was really good when he was on the mound, struck out about 10 batters per 9 innings, had an ERA plus of 141. James Shields from 2011, he was worth 5.8 wins. He went 16-12 with a 2.82 ERA. And he was very dependable that year. 33 starts, 11 complete games, and 4 shutouts, which both led the league. Almost 250 innings, 249 and a third to be exact. Struck out 225. He was an all-star, had an ERA plus of 134. David Price from 2012, his Cy Young award-winning year, led the league as he went 20-5, led the league with ERA at about 2.5. He had, over 200 innings, struck out just about a batter an inning, ERA plus of 150. Alex Cobb from 2014, 10-9 with an ERA under 3, 149 strikeouts and 166 and a third innings. And Blake Snell, his Cy Young award-winning year from 2018, as he was worth 7.1 wins, led the league going 21-5, and led the league with his ERA of 1.89. His ERA plus of 217 led the league, and he led the league in hits per 9, just 5.6 hits per 9. He struck out 11 batters per 9 innings. He did allow 3.2 walks per 9, so that was maybe the one mark against him. But great year there from Snell when he won the Cy Young. You want to share any thoughts on any of these starters before we move on to the pen?
During the Devil Rays days, pitching was a very bleak thing to watch. Basically, any day you watched, you knew that the guy on the mound was going to give up a home run or two. You'd be lucky, the score was close near the end of the game. Scott Kazmir was a lone exception to that. If you turned on the game, you saw Kazmir pitching, you thought you're going to see a good pitching matchup. You're going to see lots of strikeouts, some domination. This young kid's going to come in and dominate these teams. James Shields, he had a span in May and June of that year in 2011, he just was nearly unhittable. He threw 3 consecutive complete games, which you will not see that now. And that was just 10 years ago. Yeah, he had 3 consecutive complete games. David Price, 2012, that was his last year as a fireballer, and he won the Cy Young for it. Alex Cobb, probably the most underrated pitcher in team history. He cobbled together amazing performances and just be dependable to go 7 innings and hold an opposing team to 2 runs. And then Blake Snell, the guy who can strike out everyone in only the last 5 innings. But yeah.
And then in the bullpen, we'll start off with Jim Nasir from their opening year in 1998. He was worth 1.9 wins. He went 7-2 out of the pen, ERA just over 3, 84 innings and 68 appearances. He struck out 77. Roberto Hernandez in 99 went 2-3 with an ERA right around 3, but he had 43 saves. Struck out 69 batters in 73 1/3 innings. He was an all-star that year for Tampa. Victor Zambrano from 01. He was the one traded for, who did you mention that one?
Kazmir.
That's right. Kazmir. That's right. So Victor Zambrano, still enough to make this Rays roster from 01. He was worth 1 win, 6-2 out of the pen, 3.16 ERA. Struck out over 10 batters per 9 innings. And then we've got a guy whose name is not an ideal name for a pitcher, but he did a good job there. Grant Balfour. Luckily for the Rays that he was not throwing a lot of ball fours. In 08, he was worth 2.9 wins. 6-2 with an ERA of about 1.5, struck out 12.7 batters per 9, 82 Ks in 58 1/3 innings. And then rounding out the pitching staff, Alex Torres, the lefty from 2013, he was worth 1.9 wins, 4-2 with a 1.71 ERA, 62 strikeouts in 58 innings, good for 9.6 strikeouts per 9. As I mentioned earlier, I'm short a couple relievers in this since the time frame was 98 to 2019. If you expand it into 2020, you can add another reliever, although you may, if I were to redo this roster from 98 to 2020, that might change things, as I don't know who I would take in 2020, if it would be a reliever or a catcher, or if I would take somebody else and then have to really redo everything. But so that's where we stand on this one. Any thoughts on these relievers? I know a lot of them, Nasir, Hernandez, and Zambrano all came very, very early in the Rays' existence.
Zambrano, so they eventually moved him to the starting rotation, and he was actually the team's opening day starter in 04, but he was the team's best starter in 03. And if this shows you how bad the team was, I remember him getting to double-digit wins on the final day of the season, and the Rays broadcaster, Dwayne Stats, saying, he's got 10 wins. He's one of the first ones in team history to reach the double digits and wins. It's like, okay, that's something to celebrate. But yeah, Grant Balfour, he was the raging Australian. He had a huge moment during the 08 LADS. Orlando Cabrera was at the plate. It was a tense situation, close ball game. And for some reason, the two of them just started getting to a shouting match. Like, the ball wasn't thrown anywhere near him. It just was a ball. And then the two got into a shouting match. Balfour strikes him out, tells him to SDFD, go back to the dugout. That's one of the funner moments in team history. Alex Torres. Most people probably know him for the padded hat that he wore during games. That happened because one of the starting pitchers on this list, Alex Cobb, got hit by a line drive in the head during the 2013 season. And Torres saw that, and he wanted to, get some protection for your head. And he's one of the people who tried to pioneer that padded hat, which for some reason hasn't taken off, probably due to the look. But pitchers would rather be unsafe than, have a padded helmet on the mound. But yeah, that's what I got on him.
It'll be interesting to see if, as we continue to develop technology and stuff, if they're able to, I'm sure at some point, eventually they'll be able to get that a little more wearable and less obtrusive and less, look a little more normal. So yeah, we'll see. Alex Torres, though, he'll be among the first to wear it. The original one. But so yeah, we'll see. Go ahead.
One more thing to point out. Sorry, I didn't mean to, as a train of thought in my head. I was talking about the trade tree earlier and like how the Rays just cobbled together deals. So they had Victor Zambrano. He got them Scott Kazmir. Scott Kazmir got them Alex Torres. Alex Torres eventually gets them Logan Forsythe, and Logan Forsythe, he got them Jose De Leon, which didn't work out. But it just shows you like these trades, they just keep stringing together and keeping deals alive to keep the team competitive, and that's just how the team stays a success for all these years.
I love those when you're able to kind of look back. You go on Baseball Reference, dig down those rabbit holes, see who's traded for whom, and it's always a fun deep dive. And yeah, interesting to see who teams are able to turn certain players into. And yeah, to be successful, you really have to, especially a team in the Rays position, really got to maximize those trades when you're in a position to trade a guy. So yeah, very interesting to see that. Great tidbit there. So that's the Rays roster that I have put together here. Adam, it's a lot of fun putting these rosters together. At least, I have a lot of fun doing it. I've done them for all 30 teams, and I understand you've put together your own Rays roster, and you're the Rays expert, so you can kind of find some flaws in my roster. So what differences did you have? Who was on the Rays roster that you created following these rules?
Gotcha. Our rosters are very similar. I just, picked and choose a couple of different players from you. Jim Messier were both the same on, but in 1999, you went with Roberto Hernandez. I went with his all-star compatriot, Jose Canseco. Jose Canseco was off. He's a character. But I mean, in 1999, dude was crushing the ball. He was almost on a record-breaking pace early on in the season. He was leading all of baseball in home runs. He was just crushing everything. He was named to the All-Star game. He was going to do the home run derby. Then his back issues started flaring up, and he just lost everything. He lost 2 months of the season, lost all of his power. But I mean, even though he played in just 113 games and still hit 34 home runs, so that shows you he was popping.
Yeah.
So I would go for him as my DH. Then let's see, where you went with Greg Vaughn for your DH in 2000. I took I took Roberto Hernandez that year. So I still went with him just a year later. I did not pick Victor Zambrano. I went with Esteban Yan, who was one of the team's initial closers, or someone that tried to get the ball to at least get some outs at some points. He is known for a home run he hit. He's one of the only players in baseball history, a select few, to have homered on their first at bat, and I think he homered on the first pitch he's seen in his first at bat. He did it against the Mets, I think, in 2000. Let's see, go down the list, see what other differences we have. 2006 is our next difference. Let's see, in 2006, you went with Scott Kazmir, who was an all-star that year, I think. He was the Rays lone all-star that year. I went with Rocco Baldelli. Rocco was injured to start the year, and I think he actually finished the year on the injured list as well. He went through a cavalcade of injuries, eventually got diagnosed as a mitochondrial disorder, and I didn't even think that was a misdiagnosis, but when he was on the field, he was healthy. In 92 games, he got 3.4 FWAR. So that shows and he had 16 home runs and just 387 plate appearances. So he was hitting well, had 10 stolen bases. If he could just be healthy, he was a great player, but he was on my bench. Let's see. Next difference is 2012. All right, yeah, 2012 is when I went with my catcher, Jose Molina. He's not known for his offense. That year, he actually hit decent for a catcher. He's known for flummoxing hitters at the plate. He would take a ball a foot off the edge and bring it back and be called a strike. That's what he was known for, framing. He was a big reason why the 2012 team's pitching staff was record breaking. He could take balls way off the plate, make them strikes, and he actually hit well. He had 8 home runs. He had 3.6 FWAR in just 102 games, showing you how well his defensive abilities contributed to his game. Let's see here.
Yeah, and he was, nowadays everyone's so focused on that, on the receiving and the framing, and they're trying to quantify it. But yeah, Molina was doing that before it was very well known, and he was really ahead of the game in there.
Yeah, Zay, that's just the Rays knew that, and they targeted him for it. They got him for pennies on the dollar because they found one of the inefficiencies in the game so they could exploit, and it was pitch framing. And now everyone is about pitch framing.
Yep.
Let's see, 2012, 2013, 13. You went with Alex Torres, and that's the year I went with David Price. 2013, David Price, I think, is the best pitcher I have seen in baseball. He had such a weird year. He started the season kind of rocky. He wasn't performing very well at all. He got hurt, and then he came back, and he just decided that he wasn't going to walk hitters anymore. Just wasn't going to. He introduced a backdoor cutter, and he abandoned his slider, and he was just dominant. He threw, I think, 7 scoreless innings his first time out, and then a shutout time after that, and he just became the David Price that would go on to dominate the league for the next several years. Let's see. 14, I went with Jake McGee, who that was the year he blossomed as one of the best relievers in all of baseball. That's the year you went with Alex Cobb, who was a great starting pitcher. That's 2015. You went Kiermaier. I went with Chris Archer, which that 15 incarnation of Archer was the best Archer. He his slider was lights out. His fastball was on point. He commanded it. Hitters chased. He was just excellent on the mound. And then let's see. I went with the 2018 Snell. I think you went with him too. Yeah. So and then I rounded out my starting rotation with Charlie Morton in 2019 because Charlie Morton was an excellent veteran pitcher. I'm still upset the Rays let him go in free agency this year. He is one of the few offseason signings for them that actually worked out better than expected. Because, he literally did everything right. I can't remember an awful outing from him. He always delivered. So, yeah, Charlie Morton rounds out mine. And then if there was a 2020 on this, I went with Brendan Mile.
All right, nice. Very well done. And, yeah, it's fun, putting it together. And, once you kind of take one guy, the dominoes start to fall, right? And you got to figure out, all right, what position do I take? So, yeah, a lot of similarities, a few differences as well. Were there any other names that you wanted to mention who you think deserve consideration?
There were guys I wanted for the bullpen who I just couldn't fit in because I needed other players in that year. Fernando Rodney in 2012 was one. Rafael, 2010 had a lot of guys. 2010 you had Jason Bartlett, shortstop. You had Carl Crawford in 2010 was better than any other year in his career. Then Rafael Soriano in the bullpen, Joaquin Benoit, who is also excellent.
That's right.
Jose Alvarado. Do what?
Yeah, no, it's a green. Yeah, those guys are very, very deserving to be mentioned.
Yeah, I was really wanting Jose Alvarado, but I couldn't squeeze him in. Jose Alvarado, I think, has the best pitches I've ever seen from a bullpen pitcher.
Is he the lefty that they traded to? Was it Philly?
Yeah, he's the guy. He'll throw 101, and yet it will still move 2 feet on its way to the plate somehow.
Yeah. I know you went with Canseco in 99. I had him in my notes as somebody who, that was a great season. Also McGriff in 99, the crime dog.
Yeah.
Had a good year there in 99. Rodney, you mentioned Bartlett. Tommy Pham was another guy who deserved consideration, I felt like.
Yeah, I considered him for my right field. Tommy Pham was a fun guy to watch baseball. He's just awesome to watch. He has such a serious demeanor and just business-like approach. But it's just so much fun to watch him play.
Yeah, and then Willie Adames was another guy I wanted to mention, as having some decent years there, playing some good shortstop. And then yeah, catcher was I
Mhm.
felt like a bit of a weak spot. It's tough to get a really good catcher. Darno, like you said, when he came over from the Dodgers when they got him, he did hit well. I would like a full season there. That was kind of the downside on him, is that he only had 365 plate appearances. Obviously, catcher is not going to have as many as other positions, but even 365, you'd
Mhm.
like a lot more. So if you had more, you would have been even more valuable. But yeah, catcher was a tough spot to fill as well. But yeah, so it's fun, and listeners, if anybody else wants to put a roster together, it's a fun exercise. I encourage that. You can do so on your own. I have a template on the website on boxseatbanter.com that you can go ahead and download from Google Sheets. And if you do complete a roster, I would love to see that. So go ahead, feel free to submit it. Share that with me. But yeah, it's definitely a fun exercise. And I know that, when you make one, there's lots of, you could take this guy or this guy. And like you said, in 2010, there's a lot of tough decisions that you got to make. So, if you're critiquing my roster, you're critiquing Adam's roster, go ahead and make your own, make one better. If you are so inclined. Every week we take listener questions to ask our experts here on their questions on the team. So we open it up on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. So again, make sure to follow there, get your questions in when you have them. Our first question comes from Chris Kirk, just asking about the roller coaster of emotions, and what was it like on that final day in 2011, when the Rays, I guess Longoria hit that home run, right, to win the wild card. What was it like being a Rays fan in the moment there on the last day of the season?
Uh, that day, man. I literally just got goosebumps and chills literally thinking about that day, because it sent so many feel. It was just absolutely incredible. It's what you always want as a fan, but you don't want it because it makes you feel awful, but you also love it.
Well, that's what makes it so great, right? I mean, I think
Yeah, yeah.
before the game, you just want like a nice, easy 10-0 win, so it's stress free, right? And then when you have that ridiculous, crazy game afterwards, it's so much worth it when you get the win, right?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, the entire month leading up to that game was incredible. So I'm getting a little excited talking about it. But so September starts. They were 8.5 games back of the Red Sox in September. You have 20 some games left. You don't make that up.
Yeah, and
But
the
then,
Red Sox were stacked that year too.
yeah, yeah,
And
that's when they had their dream team. They had the Crawford, they had Adrian Gonzalez, they had everybody that they had gone out the offseason before, bulked up their team because they wanted to make it to a World Series again. They had Dustin Pedroia, David Ortiz, Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford. I think that there was a newspaper article that said the best team ever for the Boston Red Sox entering the season. And then, they were well on their way to the wild card, while the Rays and were 8.5 out. That was over. But then the Rays just started winning, and the Red Sox couldn't win. They could stop figuring out how to win. Um, Entering the final series of the season, the Rays are taking on the Yankees. The Red Sox are taking on the lowly Orioles in Baltimore. And the Rays just need Baltimore to win some games, and the Rays have to win every game against the Yankees. Game 160, Jeremy Hellickson's on the mound. He gets into a bases loaded situation in the 5th inning. And Jeremy Hellickson's one of the most stoic people on the mound. He has no emotion. He's baby faced. He strikes you out, doesn't smile, walks to the dugout, doesn't do anything. But bases loaded, nobody out, tie game. He gets a ground ball to third base, and it's a triple play. A triple, like, this is stuff that's made up from movies. And then he, of course, walks off the mound screaming with enthusiasm. Next day, the Rays are down 2-0. Rafael Soriano's on the mound, the one who the Rays let go the year before because, of course, he got too expensive. Became a free agent, signed with the Yankees for 3 years. The Yankees are up 2-0. Soriano's on the mound. Matt Joyce at the plate. Joyce clobbers a 3-run home run, puts the Rays in the lead. They go on the win. And then, of course, entering game 162. The Red Sox, I think, had split their series with Baltimore. The Rays had taken the first 2 from the Yankees, so now they're tied. The Rays win. It just depends on what's going on. If both teams win, they play tiebreaker. If both teams lose, tiebreaker. But if one wins and the other loses, season's over. And of course, how does that game start out? With an error by Ben Zobrist. Mark Teixeira hits a grand slam, and the Rays fall down 6-0 early. Boston takes the lead in Baltimore, and that's it. The season's over. Like, you were not expecting a comeback. The Yankees even sent out their D squad, like their E squad, their F squad, their rookies on the 40-man roster. Dellin Betances was the starter for them in that game, and he was a reliever at that point. Oh yeah, he's always been a reliever, but I mean, that was his major league debut, I think, was in that game. And they shut out the Rays. Andrew Jones eventually hit a home run. They were down 7-0. And then the Red Sox were up 2-0 in Baltimore, I believe. But then the rain came, and there's an awesome sound bit of a Red Sox announcer saying that I think it's clear that there won't be baseball play tomorrow. The Red Sox are going to win this game, and they're going to be playing the wild card series. And then, of course, the rain comes, postponed. The bottom of the 8th in Tampa, they load the bases. They score on a hit by pitch, and then a walk. A sacrifice fly brings in another run. Then Brian Anderson and Dwayne Staats say, just for fun, wouldn't it be fun for Evan Longoria to hit a home run? He does. 3-run shot, makes it a 1-run game. The bottom of the 9th, Corey, there's just so many storylines in this game. Corey Wade was with the Rays. He was with them. He should have been called up. He was dominating in Durham, but they wouldn't give him the opportunity. So they released him, and he signed with the New York Yankees. So here he comes, bottom of the 9th. Corey Wade is on the mound. And then who else do the Rays bring up to the plate but Dan Johnson? They have 2 outs, and Dan Johnson is the guy that Joe Madden goes to. Now, if anyone wasn't a Rays fan, they'd be like, why is Dan Johnson coming up? This guy doesn't hit. But Dan Johnson, all he does is hit good home runs for the Rays. 2008, he had a game-winning home run. 2010, he had a bunch of clutch home runs. And then 2011, he gets to a 2-2 count, and he smacks a ball down the right field line and ties the game. And that moment was just unbelievable. My dad was watching the game at a bar down the street, and I was on tape delay. And he knew that because he had called me the inning before to say, hey, did you see the Evan Longoria home run? I said, what do you mean? He's at the bat. And then I see it happen. But yeah, he waited a few minutes to call me on that one. We're both kind of just getting really excited. It's like, are you glad I waited to call you on that one, son? It's like, yeah. And then, of course, meanwhile, Boston and Baltimore get back to playing. And that game is tied at some point, that game gets tied at some point. I'm kind of failing to remember what's going on in that game. Then the Rays went from being down 7-0 to being playing in a tied game and actually having a chance to make it. And it was just unfathomable. Like, you couldn't believe it. And then they traded zeros, and you just knew at that point the Rays weren't going to lose. There was no way. Like, you didn't even care when the Yankees were batting. You just like, okay, well, they're not going to score. And then in the top of the 12th, Greg Golson singles to center. He makes it to third after an error. So now the Yankees have first and third, nobody out, and it doesn't matter. There's a ground ball to Longoria. He tags out Golson at third, and it's just like, okay, of course that happened. And then baseball kismet happened in the bottom of the 12th. So it's about approaching midnight. Longoria is at the plate. Baltimore's come back to tie it against Boston in the bottom of the 9th. Then, can't remember his first name, but Robert Andino lines the ball to left field in Baltimore. There's a runner on second. He's running on contact. Carl Crawford, the man who the Rays had just let go of the free agency the year before, running in, trying to make patented sliding catch. He has a sliding catch where it looks like he's sliding into a base and just immediately catches the ball, pops up, and he's done it so many times. He'll make a catch 11 times out of 12. He rarely misses it. Well, of course, this is the lone time that he started to slide too early. Ball pops off his mitt. He pops up, throws it home with his noodle arm, and Orioles win the game, storm the field, and it's a celebration for the ages in Baltimore. Boston immediately goes to the clubhouse, watches the TV, sees Longoria at the plate, and in Tropicana Field, they're going nuts because they see the scoreboard. And everyone's just, nobody believes it because it's just not what happens. Like, baseball is not supposed to line up that symmetrically. You can't have all these results going on at the same time, and yet it all's just lining up. So then, of course, Longoria smacks the line drive down the left field line, throws his hands up in the air. The Rays win, and then 2 days later, they're in the division series. It was an absolutely amazing night, the greatest night of baseball ever. Never will happen again.
Yes, wasn't it better that it played out like that as opposed to the Rays winning 7-0 cruising, and then the Orioles just beating the Red Sox handily?
I'll use a Terry Francona quote before that game. He was asked how he felt about it, and he said, "It's great for baseball, but bad for my heart."
That's a great point. Yeah, certainly as a fan, I've been there several times. So yeah, I mean, it's as an outsider who's not a fan of any of the teams involved, it was just something to witness. So I'm sure as a Rays fan, being there, living it,
I have an extreme guilty pleasure. It kind of makes me a horrible person. One of the things I love doing is going back and reading game threads by Red Sox fans who were watching that and commenting it as it was happening. Bill Simmons has a blog that he was doing that day, and I absolutely love reading it.
Yeah, it's nice how everything can be preserved there, where we can go back and look at all the all the freezing cold takes that people had in the moment, right?
Yeah, it was amazing.
And on the flip side, so as great as that moment was, I'm sure that you don't want to look at, and I'm sure that you're also tired of discussing it. What was your thought process and feelings when Cash came out of the dugout to take Snell out of the game there in Game 6 of the World Series?
It's one of those things, hindsight's 2020. Knowing what you know now, would you do the same move? It's a fun thought process of analytics meets baseball psychology, because I mean, a lot of thought goes into that move. It wasn't just Kevin Cash saying, "Oh, he got a hit off him, I'm taking him out."
Mm-hmm.
Cash was playing for Game 7 as well as Game 6, and he thought at the time the best chance the Rays had was bringing in Nick Anderson. And I mean, Nick Anderson had been his shutout dominant guy. He hadn't been great in the postseason, but he was fantastic all year long and the year before. And it didn't work out, which sucks. And Cash is going to have to live with that forever. And there's a lot of reasons as to probably why it didn't work out. Blake Snell's gone on record saying that he saw Nick Anderson warming up and that threw him off his game. I'm in the camp of Kevin Cash. I say it was the right move at the time because that's what got them there. They made the smart baseball moves, and it's worked out for them more times than not. And if they start betraying their trust on that, then who knows what will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. You saw what?
Well, I saw the piece that Snell had, I think, in the Players Tribune talking about that, where he said he lost his focus with the reliever in the pen. I mean, I think it's at that point in the game, it's irresponsible as a manager to not have somebody getting warm.
That is my exact opinion on it. Like Blake Snell, even though how dominant he is, it's the 6th inning of this Game 6 of the World Series. If you lose, the series is over. You have to know that there's going to be a pitcher in the bullpen, and you can't let that ruin you from your performance that you're having, your performance of the lifetime that you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, that was the best Blake Snell I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best performance he's ever had. He was lights out. Everything was going where he wanted it. And then he gave up that seeing eye single. It was a tiny little dribbler to the right side. And then Nick Anderson comes in, gives up the double to Betts, wild pitch, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. I agree with the move. There's a lot of people who won't. I've already heard from a bunch of people who don't agree with the move. But again, it's analytics meeting the psychology of the game. And more times than not, analytics is going to win out.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't in that case.
Yeah, and I know that, last week on the show talking about the Red Sox, it was when you go back to 03, it was the opposite situation where Pedro was in the game in game 7, and Little leaves him out there way too long and it cost him the game. So I mean, it's kind of like, the thing is with baseball is you can do everything right and the result is bad, and you can do everything wrong and the result is good. You can make a great pitch and hit your location, and the guy swings, it hits it off the end of the bat and it goes on a base hit. It's like, well, things like that happen. So it can be frustrating when you're so focused on the results. So like you said, hindsight is 2020. We look at it, obviously it did not work since Anderson came in and he gave up the lead, but yeah, we don't know what would have happened if Snell stayed in there. Maybe Betts hits a 2-run home run off of Snell, and then everyone's clamoring the other way. How could you leave him in?
It was his third time facing the order. Betts had been red hot all series long. I mean, he'd been crushing the ball, so there's a very good chance that could have happened. The one thing I would do different is a different reliever.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there.
Yeah, Nick Anderson, he was struggling all postseason. I think Cash should have had a different reliever. He had, like he said, a stable of arms. He could have brought in someone else, but it's the end of the day. You move on, and 2021 is a new year, hopefully. And his bullpen's basically been remade as of right now. So, and anything can happen.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's managers, obviously the bullpen decisions are the toughest decisions. I think the most scrutinized decisions that managers make. And when the players, when they get outs, it makes the manager look smart. On the flip side, Dave Roberts, he went to the pen early there in game 6, and every reliever that came in did a great job. And I mean, that makes Robert in that game look brilliant. I know he's had previous circumstances in the postseason where that's not been the case, but yeah, when the relievers get the outs, it makes the manager look smart. And unfortunately for Cash, that was not the case. And then the last thing I want to ask you is, the Rays were formed there. They in 1998 as an expansion team. What was it like being, because a lot of these teams have been around for decades and decades and decades, some going back to the 1800s. What was it like being, in an area where a team was created? Like, how early did you adopt the Rays in your fandom? Like, how old were you at the time? What was that like? Because that's a novel concept for me.
Yeah. So the Rays have a very interesting fan base. They have the unenviable position of playing in a spring training oasis.
Mm-hmm.
So I started following the team in 2002. My dad got tickets from his work, and we went to go see a game against the Yankees. It was during their 13, 14, 15 game losing streak in 2002. And the thing that immediately got me was, we're here, we're cheering for the Devil Rays. We're the only Devil Ray fans in the building. Everyone else is cheering for the Yankees. There's not one other Devil Ray fan in the place I can find. The poor camera crew who, zooms in on fans during the game, trying to find them, put them on the Jumbotron, they were struggling. They couldn't find nobody. That's how it was impossible. And that's how it is almost for every home game. There's whoever the spring training home was, whenever they come to play at the Trop, that's the home team. The Devil Rays aren't going to be the team that's cheered for. Whenever the Blue Jays come to town, the Blue Jays are cheered for because they're in Dunedin. Or the Braves, they're going to be cheered for. The Red Sox, they're in Fort Myers. The Yankees, they have Tampa. So it's never been a fully dedicated fan base in the area to the Rays just because of that spring training home breeding ground. And even because the area of Tampa Bay has been home to spring training for a century, hundreds of years, not hundreds of years, but like 100 years. I think the Cardinals have been there. I think the Dodgers at one point maybe called it home. I'm not sure on that.
They were, yeah. And I know, what was it? Shoot, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name, but yeah, the Dodgers did train in Florida there for many years.
Yeah, and see, and all these, and basically what happened is Florida got this baseball team. Well, the Marlins are Miami, but Miami's basically its own state away from Tampa. But so Tampa Bay got a baseball team. So all these people who rooted their entire lives for all these historic teams that you mentioned, these teams with decades of history, were like, okay, hey, they're coming to Tampa. Let's go see a game. So the thought was that once the Rays started, all the fans in the area would just change their fandom to the Rays, and that didn't happen. Me growing up, I grew up in Homosassa, was about an hour north of Tampa, and nobody watched baseball. I went to a school with a decent number of kids, and I think I was the only one who actually rooted for the Rays. Anytime I talked about it, nobody really paid attention to them. It was all football. So, the sport didn't grab hold. Everyone plays baseball, but they just don't really watch it. If they did, they cheered for the Braves. But yeah, that's basically it. You hope to find a Rays fan whenever you go to the games, but generally you're going to find opposing teams.
Interesting. I know in those runs there in 08, everyone had their cowbells, right, going crazy. So there are Rays fans out there, right?
Yeah, the fandom comes whenever the team wins. So then, even when they were winning, it faded away, which is weird. So even 2010, I think, is when the Evan Longoria and David Price had to beg fans to come to the games. And it's just, they come when they're winning, and then interest fades out.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, it is an interesting scenario there, how they're formed. And I know it's also funny because it seems like Tampa was always the threat, and any other team always had the threat of moving to Tampa. The Giants almost moved there in the early 90s. The Mariners, I think, almost moved there in the mid 90s before they were able to get their stadium built. Even the fictional, it's a real team, the Indians, but the fictional version of them in the movie Major League, the fictional owner, Rachel Phelps, wanted to move the team to Florida. Yeah. So it seems like Tampa's always been
Tampa was always the bargaining chip.
Yeah.
But it felt so bad for the city of Tampa. If you look back at their history of this, they tried everything they could to try to bring in a team. They even built their stadium, Tropicana Field. At that point, it was the Florida Suncoast Dome. They built a stadium showing, hey, baseball, come on, we already have a stadium. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And that was in 1986. They ground broke in 1990. And that's why the stadium was already 10 years old before they even played a game. One of the worst, best stories was the White Sox. I forget what year it was, but the White Sox, they had moved to Tampa. It was done. They didn't reach a deal. Yeah, the deal was they missed the deadline. They were officially going to move to Tampa. And then they did a courthouse meeting. They turned the clock back 5 minutes and said, oh, okay, we agreed to a deal. And that was it. It was stuff like that happened all the time. So the White Sox got their new stadium. The Giants got their new stadium. The Mariners got their new stadium. And Tampa got their old stadium and eventually an expansion team.
Yep. All right. So yeah, appreciate your insight on those questions. Those are what we had this week. And again, make sure to follow on social media at Boxy Banter on Twitter and Instagram to get those questions in. We've spent a good deal of time talking about the roster and all the players for the Rays, but now we will grade the roster So Adam, first, I will ask you to grade this Rays roster, and it's, we're grading it hypothetically. How well do you think it would compete against similarly constructed rosters from all the other teams following the same time period? So first, what do you think some strengths and weaknesses of this roster are, and can you give it a letter grade?
Okay. The Rays, their strength is always going to be starting pitching. And your roster doesn't, your roster showcases that. Let me pull it back up here. Let's see. Yeah. So, yeah, your roster definitely showcases that. You got 2 Cy Young winners in there. So, yeah, starting pitching is definitely going to be a plus because obviously you have 2 of the best pitchers in baseball for the past 2 decades. And then, some guys who obviously are candidates for that as well. Offensively, that's where the Rays will take the back seat and probably plummet their roster. Because you got guys like Aubrey Huff, Randy Wynn. Let's see what else you got on here. Kevin Kiermaier, Travis d'Arnaud. Those are guys who all had pretty solid years. But if you look at other teams' rosters in the past 25 years, you're going to find guys way better. And then the bench, that is what it is as well. So this roster, comparatively to rosters from the past 20, 25 years, it would be competitive. It would by no means be the best one. I would say competitively, it would be a bottom half, probably a C, ranging on a D, just because, there's a lot of talent out there, and the Rays what makes the Rays special, it's never just one player. It's a lot of players combining to make good. It was like what Joe Madden said in 2008, 9 equals 8. 9 players playing really good baseball all year long is going to equal one of 8 playoff teams. Now one of the 20 playoff teams, that's how many they got. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Obviously, when I compare the stats of this Rays team with the stats of every other team, they're going to be at a disadvantage in the counting stats because they're short a few years since they miss out on 95, 6, and 7. So they've already got that as a disadvantage to start. Plus, most of the time when an expansion team begins play, they are also at a disadvantage because they don't have the buildup and the returning players in the farm system for several years. So they've got that against them too. They do have some good speed numbers, a lot of triples, stolen bases. So that's a positive. Pitching wise, they've got good strikeout, good hits per 9 numbers. Like you mentioned, the starting pitchers is more of a strength for them. But even with, the 3 roster spots that are missing, if I were to, I guess it's hard to kind of grade on a curve there. But, all things considering, it's like you mentioned, yeah, they are going to have a tough time competing with some teams that are really stacked. And I think your assessment is fair. I'm a little bit below your grade of the D or a C. I gotta go with an F. If I adjust for the lack of players there, then maybe that rises a little bit. And but maybe they also surprised with that the good pitching. But with Snell, he was obviously so dominant, but then he was not going as deep into games. And I think arguably the bullpen in the past few years may have been better as a whole than the one that I was actually able to assemble using the whole time frame. So yeah, I got to give them a little bit, but I think your assessment is very fair as well. So that's the grades that we have. If you want to chime in with listeners with your grades, go ahead, and I would love to hear your comments on the strengths and weaknesses of the roster as well.
Just to add into a little point you said, like the expansion teams, that's one thing that drove Vince Naimoli crazy in the beginning. The Diamondbacks came in, they snagged Randy Johnson. I don't know how they went about doing that. They got Randy Johnson.
Well, he went out and had
10 more years.
He was a free agent.
Was it a free agent?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, they snagged Randy Johnson. He goes out and has a 10-war year for him. Their veterans that they brought in, Steve Finley, Luis Gonzalez, Matt Williams, they actually were good.
Yeah.
And that somehow led to them being a contender. They got to the World Series in 01, beat the Yankees. And that right there, I think that was the tipping point for Nomoli. He was just done after that.
Yeah. Adam, it's been fun talking about the Tampa Bay Devil Rays and the Tampa Bay Rays with you. So I appreciate you coming on, joining the program. As we wrap up here, I'll offer it up to you. What are your final thoughts that you want to share with us about the Rays, about the organization?
I believe the Rays are never not going to be a fun team to watch. They're always going to be doing these innovative things on the field that make you scratch your head, will make the old-time baseball guys angry, the new analytics guys just absolutely ecstatic about what plans they introduce. They're just a fun team to watch. And that's all I got to say on them.
Yeah, I think that, nobody does more with less than the Rays. Friedman did a great job of it, the extra 2% and getting the Rays into the postseason. Neander's done a great job of continuing that success. They consistently contend, which is tough, obviously, for the payroll restrictions, but also when you're in the same division as the Yankees, Red Sox, even the Blue Jays in Toronto are a major market there with a ton of financial potential there to just, to have the big payrolls and to have the infrastructure. So what Tampa's been able to do is very, very impressive. And as an outsider, they are an easy and they're a very fun team to root for. I think the fans normally, if you're watching a game between a David and a Goliath, most people are going to root for David, and that's what Tampa is.
There's also one thing with the Rays. Something I've heard from within their organization is where they have to be very careful about the players that they choose to invest in. They want to cultivate a fun clubhouse that people actually want to be in, a nice atmosphere. They can't go out and risk getting somebody who's going to be detrimental to what they're preaching there. So someone comes in and is just in an awful mood. That's going to drag down the clubhouse. And even though they're an analytically based team chemistry is a thing. And if somebody's, dragging down the atmosphere, they're not going to play as well as a happy team.
Right.
And that's one thing that they will go out and do. They will make sure they get a player who fits in well. They'll get G-Man Choi, who he's just absolutely a joy to watch. Brett Phillips, I mean, he's known just for his glove, but if you watch him interact with the other players in the team, they love him. Randy Arozarena is another one. He's really great in the clubhouse. He had the off-field incident in December, which was highly publicized, which turned out to be a really minor matter. But I mean, he's been really great in the clubhouse, and you will rarely hear or find somebody who is dragging down the team in the clubhouse, or even after they leave, they will not badmouth the team either. They'll badmouth some of the decision making in the business, but they will not, they will not have to face the team in any way.
Yeah. So with all that said, they are a very, very easy, fun team to root for. So I hope that they can continue to have success on the field and continue to get to the postseason, and hopefully they get over the hump. I know they came up just short this past year in 2020, but hopefully they can get over the hump, and hopefully the fans get out to the Trop, drive across the bridge, and are able to see it.
Yeah. Hey, there is one more thing I'd be remiss for not saying, and that is that the Rays will have the best player in baseball for the next decade. That is Wander Franco. He's going to be phenomenal. Absolutely the best player I've ever seen. So there you go. Enjoy him.
All right. When it's time to revisit this roster in a few years and redo it, he'll definitely be. He's looking like he'll be in position to be the shortstop in the roster one of these years. So Adam, again,
not saying he's great. Just go ahead and start designing the Hall of Fame plaque.
All right, calling your shot right now. Adam, it's been a lot of fun. Again, make sure to check him out at D-Rays Bay and his YouTube channel at the Sanfords. So again, Adam, thanks for joining. I appreciate your your knowledge and input on the Rays.
Thank you, sir. Have me on anytime.
All right. This is Billy Ballas of Box Seat Banter signing off.